Yeah, I'd like to call to order the 926th meeting of the Board of Directors of Alexandria Sanitation Authority, now known as Alex Renew. I have a motion to approve the agenda as it appears. Second?
Second.
Favor?
Aye.
Secretary, do we have members of the public? The traffic again, I'm sure. Hey, board members, if you would take a look at the consent agenda, minutes from our meeting on the 21st. Entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Couple of administrative things. Finance and Audit Committee, Mr. Jenks. Something coming up.
That's right. We'll soon have a budget. We'll talk a little bit about it tonight, at least a high overview without numbers. We'll get our budget and start to work.
Fun ahead. Governance Committee,
We have a meeting coming up April 7th.
board calendar on tab 2. Carl, anything to point out?
Maybe just two staff introductions before we get started.
Sure.
My name is Kyle Chan.
Sorry, you've been with us for a decade. 2 decades. Great. Good to see you again.
Just in the green folders, I think 2 things to note. The finance and audit prep meeting was added to the board calendar for 2024. The March 26th meeting was added to the board calendar. That's the prep meeting for governance committee. And one update is you'll see June 7th is now the host run destination date. We moved that to a what is not in the calendar at the time when we checked it, but we moved it. So it's just 3 major changes on the board.
Say that last one again. Sorry.
June 7th is going to be the first run dedication event in African American Heritage. The other item in there, the colorful slide that Ms. Huff has up on the screen. Wanted to take like 2 minutes just to explain something that was presented before the screen. And I'll walk through. I wanted to make sure that, and you presented at the board meeting, there's a mention of 811 days of cash on hand. Yeah, remember that curve?
Yep.
Terry presented, Manny then discussed it later. You'll notice that in our board report, we show 146 days of cash. Those are 2 different calculations. So we wanted to just explain to the board really quick that the calculation presented at the board retreat is what we rating agencies days cash. And that looks at all of our unrestricted cash across all of our funds, revenue, operating, parity, IRR, general, and include the liquid portion of our investments and then our construction fund. So that value then is taken and divided by our operating expenses for the year to give us our days cash of 811. On a monthly basis, we only are looking at operating and a portion of our general cash to get to 146 days. So we wanted to tee this up tonight on Mr. Jinks and Dr. Juan for you all to think about as we approach finance and audit, if there's a different way we want to structure our policy to show days of cash. what we're used to seeing from the rating agencies is the red version versus what we've been doing is in this green version. And, you know, we're happy to have that discussion kind of as we move forward, but wanted to plant the seed this evening to get the board thinking about this as part of our upcoming finance model. And staff does have some thoughts as well, so we can talk about it at our March 25th meeting. But again, just, I'm surprised the question didn't come up during the meeting. I scribbled a note down, I'm like, well, it's significantly different than what we show on a month-to-month basis.
Is it okay to ask a question at this point? Which of those calculations is more operationally significant? For example, if some terrible thing happened and we had to live on cash, which of those estimates is the more accurate estimate?
I'll start. I have the advantage of we've been having these conversations this week. I think I'll start with kind of quoting Sarah, which, you know, from the standpoint of cash to cash, I think we've identified what is liquid within our funds that could be liquidated and used for our benefit. And I think that what is shown on the far right column was kind of that's been the financial policy. That was a starting point, but that ultimately if we run into issues, we want to have available cash for whether it's an operating issue, a capital issue. And there's still flexibility to move money around even though it sits in these different funds.
So the red estimate is probably the one that's more operationally significant.
Yeah.
And again, it's an estimate and you know, yeah.
And is it correct that a good portion of the general cash in effect is planned to be spent in capital?
Yeah, so there is restricted in the general cash. There is restricted to capital projects that will be restricted.
So that in effect, if I would assume the unrestricted cash number, the middle column is more volatile. Because if we don't put money in cash capital and we bonded and we spent down all the cash we planned in cash capital, that number is going to go down significantly versus the unrestricted, which is like really hands off. We have no plans for it. So I think they are both valid numbers. And while the one in the middle is clearly operationally, that's how much money we could put to a operational crisis or some uninsured capital infrastructure that we have that blows up that we have to go immediately fix with cash. So they're both valid. And I would just kind of have staff think about, do we have kind of not just unrestricted cash like we historically have had on the right, but also some different definition of unrestricted cash that was broader, that we'd also have a target of how much we want. So kind of not just a number that we're over, but some maybe range of numbers, a high and a low, one with a broader definition than another. I just ask staff to think about that. So when we get to the meeting, we can have a kind of conversation since they're both valid. And the rating agency now in Moody's report, they kind of, I'm not sure you say dinged, but they were a little critical of our cash position. So which column would they be critical of? The one on the right? The middle one. They think we ought to have more.
They were, it's interesting, I was just talking about this. Right? So we have a story of a month minimum of 150 days, but then in that report, you're referencing, you're also comparing this against the other AAA, the median of the other AAA, which is, we were saying about 700 days. And so they were noting a slight kind of starting to see a little drop off in the next couple of years because of how capital intensive of those, the days cash when compared to the median. And so we're saying, just keep an eye on that. We aren't getting a place for all of the AAA boring part, 150 days, but they're just noting that our days cash starts to dip down a little compared to the median.
I think we could have a policy that is, has more, I'll just use bookends maybe
Yeah.
to it.
Yeah.
Or a target of what we'd like to see, or a target of a minimum on the unrestricted, and then something that's like a target or a minimum on, well, one on the right-hand side, something that says this is we won't go below this. And the one in the middle, it's saying, this is where we want it. This is where ideally we'd want to be, maybe. And I think also with that, would say, what do we do with surpluses? As we've had them and we can't operate with deficit, we shouldn't. So it's a matter of how much surplus we have, and do we, if we determine that we need to build up one or both of those numbers, how do we do, where's the money come from? And then does it get programmed to capital, or do we just say, no, we want to just, it's unrestricted. We're just going to kind of build our base cash number. So
Sounds like we might need multiple targets.
I-
And I think that's fine, right? I think that reflects the increased sophistication of Alex Renew and the increased sophistication of the board. Okay. Carl, you've got us thinking.
Board retreat was on the 7th and 8th. We reviewed rate structure. The board took the outcomes, wanted to give an update to the board where we are. We have two alternatives. One is the equivalent residential unit rate structure. And within that rate structure, we have some sub-alternatives. We have variations on fixed versus variable. And then we have tiered rates on residential and the commercial class. We're going to carry a volumetric rate only as a big tool to look at equitability of the across our various customers. What we're going to do based on the board feedback is we're expanding our sample size group to 350 different properties in Alexandria that's mainly going to be under the commercial class. And we'll make sure we get a couple of residential in there as well with different water use characteristics. Once we get that class established using the random number generator, we're going to ground truth it, confirm what we think it actually is. And then we'll come to the board and present an overview of that sample class. While we're doing that, we're also collecting 2 years worth of water data records. We confirmed that we can get down to the gallon. So we're going to be a little more precise in our model by modeling instead of around K-gallon, around gallon. So we're going to be using that data to do the additional model runs with that sample class. We are going into a rate setting year.
Mhm.
I think Mr. Jinks brought this up at the board retreat or slightly thereafter. So for our meeting on the 26th, we are going to be bringing a rate structure that is hits both the base and variable charge. And then we're also going to do one where we do variable in the next 2 fiscal years for the revenue rate. Just to give the impact on the board commission, have a discussion, make a decision on whether or not if we want to pull back on the base rate increase. That's something we go into the board after the financing. The last thing, action item wise, is in May, we will be bringing the rate resolution policy back to the board.
I thought it was a very good retreat, and I think we came up with a couple of different metrics on how to measure these different rates and their impact in terms of equity and in terms of this revenue reliability to us. So good way to think about it.
I did have one item that wasn't on the agenda, but the board wanted to discuss the mingling event, the UM2 conference.
Good to hear.
You want to have a discussion?
Talk about the conference?
I had some notes. I think, my first impression, I don't want to sound too smug, but we have challenges, but we don't have problems. And I think a lot of that is because of both who we are and where we are. But there are, agencies out there that have a lot of difficulties ahead of them. And we're very fortunate that we're not in that shape. There were a lot of themes that will be familiar to us. They talked about PFAS, they talked about workforce. They talked a lot about workforce and workforce challenges. Talked about biosolids, rate setting and rising costs. Just a lot of things that we're familiar with. Talked a great deal about community outreach and how you reach out to the public. A couple of good quotes I thought were, one was that workplace culture is defined as how employees feel in their heart and their stomach on Sunday afternoon as they're getting ready to go into work on Monday. I thought that was a good line. I also talked to a 25-year-old woman who said that until she graduated, she had no idea about what jobs were available in the wastewater industry. She was told this, and nobody had ever told her. So, and she said that we've got to do a better job of communicating that. Louisville Water looks at their outreach as being a journalistic project, that they're storytellers, and that really spoke to me about what we do, that we tell stories. I think we're very good at that. I guess the other thing, they talked about affordability. They talked about AI. They didn't really get into any specifics on AI. The only specific discussion that I heard on artificial intelligence was from someone who came up with a software program that did computer analysis of sewer and water main videos. I'm kind of curious how well that worked, but and affordability, there really wasn't a lot that I heard from that was any different from what Manny gave us. Overall, it was a good conference. So.
I would say affordable, I would agree on that. We really didn't learn much more about it, other than it seemed there are many utilities who are wrestling with the issue. And even one of the rating analysts who was there was either from Moody's and S&P mentioned it as well. So it is common as people are wrestling with their rates going up, kind of beginning to think or thinking about what they do with rates. In some cities like Philadelphia have taken major actions, and others are, many others are considering it. Like a lot of professional conferences, it was a mix because there are very small 10 staff person utilities, and then there are utilities that have thousands of employees. You've got, for example, Los Angeles, the portions of Los Angeles County that aren't in the city. There's one organization that manages water, wastewater, water storage, and solid waste collection. And they have 27 special districts, 27 boards of directors that this organization responds to. So anytime we seem like we're a little out of line, just to kind of count your lucky stars that you don't have 26 more to deal with. So there are people who've got very unique issues, but clearly there was a lot of how we improve our organizations, and whether it is accounting and billing systems and customer assistance programs or something. I think a lot of people were doing, and then beginning to think what comes next. And the last thing I'll mention is there was a discussion, one session I went to, about green bonds. like DC Water, Denver Water, I think San Francisco. And everybody agreed that there was no bump down in interest rates of the green bonds, but they said something I hadn't heard before, which is the subscription. The people drawn to green bonds were a lot more, and investors who normally maybe wouldn't have been in the municipal bond market. So they said that that was the one very good thing about green bonds. It was getting investors who, smaller investors that we wouldn't have seen before. The other piece was keeping somehow in our information available or pushed out to the degree that's feasible, what the progress we're making that. In fact, we said with the green bonds, we were going to do something and making it easy for bondholders to find out, they invested in a green bond, they were interested in the green part of it. What did we do with the money? Where are we? Did we complete what we said we were going to do with that? What's the progress for the first couple of years until we spent all the money down? So it's clearly the industry, both water and the wastewater folks who were there, all kind of there because it's kind of how do you prove matters? How do you deal with uncertainty? Everybody, as we dealt with a couple of weeks ago, dealing with the uncertainty of whether WIFIA money is going to be available. The EPA representative who was supposed to be there was told they couldn't go, which is not, I guess, uncommon to what's happening these days. So there is clearly that uncertainty and the assumption that we'll just very well have to work on our own for the next few years. Figure out what are the right things to do. And at least a couple of the utilities talked about on ESG, maybe not calling it ESG, but continuing to work on those issues and talk about them. And I know I'm wearing other hats, other nonprofit organizations beginning to say, what are those words? They're the lightning rod words. And what other words aren't the lightning rod words that mean practically the same thing, that just kind of continuing on. So it was well worth the time and money to go.
There were a couple presentations that were just cringeworthy that you listen to them and think, yeah, it's time to get into this. One was a small city in Indiana that had started a biosolids program, and they had a farmer that was going to take all of their biosolids and he would get the permit. They figured everything was taken care of and they were home free, and he applied for a permit and there was a firestorm of public criticism. It fell apart. I think it's the things you don't expect to happen are the things that really bite you. It was good, overall a good conference.
With a very broadening experience. Too.
Yes.
Yeah, good. So,
I think feedback wise, if the board next year, the conference in Charlotte. So we might have put that on the radar, and then the board can the board can move it forward. Something we can discuss at that meeting.
good idea. Great. Any other administrative items? Yeah, let's move right into an update on environmental justice.
We talked back in December about our approach to environmental justice and our environmental justice assessment. We got some really good feedback from the board on this. Hammer, you challenged us to take a deeper dive on the existing infrastructure assessment. So we wanted to come back this evening to the board and present an update on the work that we've done to assess our existing infrastructure, as well as give a little bit of a history lesson. Mr. Beal, you'd asked a few questions with the first round of, why is the treatment plant where it is? So we tried to answer those questions in tonight's presentation. And this presentation also directly aligns with what was presented at the Utility Management Conference on Friday in East Dynas and Well, I'll skip over some of the things you've seen before. This is Matt's fancy slide for Alexandria, Virginia. We don't need to go to that. We're all very proud.
And he should be.
And we're. And it did. It did. It is a large presentation. So just Alexander, at a glance from.
We can work from the paper too.
So,
We can work from the paper.
yeah, we can. While they get that going, All right, go ahead, Lawrence. So Alexander, at a glance, we kind of refreshed this for the conference to focus on fast facts about our organization for a national audience. You can see we promoted our mission and vision. I'm going to let you get forward. Go ahead. So what we're really here to talk about tonight is to talk about in the overall framework of our environmental justice policy. We're here really tonight to talk about the assessment of our existing infrastructure. Ms. Waters is going to walk through that in a tabular format of slides. Ms. Hammer, they match what we sent the board the day after the last board meeting. So when we look at environmental justice, we really did three things over the past 8 months. We reviewed our infrastructure and locations from a historical perspective. We assessed our infrastructure for 4 main categories. We looked at environmental and health impacts, availability of services, economic burden, and how we conduct outreach to those communities. And we also did a mapping overlay analysis using EJ Screen, the city's equity data, as well as the US Census data. We presented this last time. The consultant supporting us did staff interviews, and we'll present the outcomes of those as well as part of our assessment. And then we did a review of our programs and policies. That's HR policies, that's board policies, that's our strategic plan, our capital improvement program, 10-year CIP, as well as our annual budgets. So I'm going to walk through the historical review before I turn it over to Ms. Waters. Mr. Beal said I was a nerd for getting into this, so I'm going to nerd out for the next 6 slides or so. So we start, go ahead, Lorna. We start back in the late 1940s. And the reason this is in the presentation is it's a reminder of why we're all here in this room together this evening. We're here because we had a sewer pollution problem in the Potomac River in the late 1940s, and somebody had to deal with it. It's the reason we exist. And when you look back to the 1940s, you can see some of these headlines: sewage-filled Potomac, diseases, my favorite, too thick to drink, but too thin to plow. I think we use this with every group that comes through here. We at least have this side of the presentation up and we touch on this. So between 1948 and 1952 when Alexander was formed, these are the reasons we exist. This is very similar to the groundswell that we saw with the CSO program.
Did you catch the byline on the too thick to drink? Ben Franklin.
So jumping forward, I think it's important to note existing infrastructure. 15 miles of interceptors, and we really have 5 major pumping stations as well as our wastewater plant. It's important to note the Market Center pump station is in the back building, so it's in a basement. That's just pumping flow from Alexandria over to Arlington's wastewater plant. The rest of them are nestled in the community and can directly impact the public. Interceptors are, of course, below grade. Waterfront Tunnel, River New is even further below grade. The next slide is an early sketch of our infrastructure. So the same slide that I just presented, north is to the right on this one. So you have to turn your head if you're looking up at the screen. North is to the right. And you can see somebody had taken an early drawing, looks like a sewer planning map of Alexandria, and they drew on the locations of our interceptors with a red marker. And you can see that those locations are essentially where the majority of our infrastructure is located today. So you can see the Potomac Interceptor, the Commonwealth Interceptor, and then you can see where the wastewater plant is located in the southwest quadrant.
Just how much infill of the water, wetlands and water has happened over the years. I didn't know the 4 Mile Run, I know the floods, but not that it at some point was not habitable land.
All right, so taking a step back, we wanted to focus on why is the wastewater plant where it is. So we're looking at going back through the studies and the board reports from the early 1950s. This is circa sort of 1952 to 1954. The plant took flow in July of 1956. Really, 5 locations were studied in depth for the location of the wastewater plant. One is where we're located the overlay. So on the right, we have an old map that we used for River Renew when we did our borings. This map's from 1945 on the right. And then what we did is we overlaid modern roadway systems on as markers so you can understand where these various locations are today. 495 wasn't there in 1945, but you can see, as Mr. Jinks just highlighted, where the plant is located, it was primarily marshland and part of the Hunting Creek embayment. So we're looking at a historic 1945 map. This study was done around 1952. It pretty much looked like this. So Area 1 was where we're located today, and it was a city dump. I noted as such in the study. Area 2, if you look where Area 2 is, this is the old railroad turnstile. I'm not sure what they called it, something like that. Area 2 was just further north from where we are today. Area 3 was within Jones Point Park, which was a former shipyard at that time. Area 4 was at the foot of Orinoco Bay Park. So picture our wastewater plant at Orinoco Bay Park. And Area 5 was up near where 4 Mile Run Pump Station is located today. So you can see the majority of the locations are on the gravity side of the way the topography in Alexandria works. Everything flows downhill until you reach a peak at Caton, and everything flows downhill the other direction. So the majority of the plants were on the south side of the city, and there were a few reasons why some of these options were not pursued. Option 4 wasn't pursued because of the expensive fill in Orinoco Bay to create a wastewater plant. Option 3 in Jones Point Park wasn't pursued because the city was at the time, and the Park Service were working on converting that to a national park. So that was off the table. Area 5 required significant filling. Geography didn't work as well as the other areas either. So that really left areas 1 and 2. The good thing about option 1 was selected over 2 is because this land was already owned. And we thought it was pretty important that when they looked at these various options, is they looked at our proximity to residences. Both at the time had limited proximity to residences. There's one neighborhood within the southwest quadrant that existed at the time, just east of the cemeteries and east and west of South Patrick Street, this area right here. This is where the substation is for Dominion. On the west side of Hoofs Run, it was pretty much industrial. So these options were preferred because of our impact on the community. So an area that was sort of out of place, out of mind was being looked at. Some other things that the planners looked at was how easily you could access each of these areas by the local street network. And then how the structures could be arranged on site, as well as how the outfall sewer for the plant would be routed. The closer you are to water, the easier it is to route your outfall sewer. The inland option was a little more difficult. So Those factors drove the early planners to option one, which is where we're located today. It did require some infilling, which you'll see in the next picture. Black out again. So here you can see the early photos of our wastewater plant construction. In the middle, you can see workers working on building A. This is looking south towards Hunting Creek in the top left. You can see our digesters and some of the early buildings going in. On the bottom, this is sort of looking west. There's building A, and you can see the city's burn building and former stack on the bottom right picture. And then you can see the primary settling tanks on the top right. So you can kind of see the lay of the land, pretty remote at the time. That's going to be the story for most of these facilities that we discuss tonight, including the intersection. So a lot of infill came in. And then the remoteness of the site, you see the trickling filters in the background. So when we look at the interceptors, that map that I started with, the interceptors, there were 8 alternatives in the sewage disposal project, where it's about this thick. There were 8 alternatives that were looked at in combination with the interceptors in the plant. We thought it was pretty interesting. If you look at option 1, this option sent flows to Dr. Wong's plant, Blue Plains. All of Alexandria's flow would have been sent to Blue Plains in that option. It would require pump stations to be built at various locations of the city to support that. Option 2 sent flows to Arlington County's wastewater plant. And then you can see our option that we ended up with, where we brought flows down to the plant at its current location. Again, around the same time in 1950, 52 timeframe. It's crazy how fast things get built back then. When we look at the history of the interceptors, we again have 4 main interceptors: Potomac Interceptor, Commonwealth Interceptor, Home Run Trunk Sewer, all built at the same time. 1954. The Potomac Yard Trunk Sewer was built to support development between 2002 and 2009. That entire pipeline was microtunnel from its location down to the plant, plastic pipe. That was supported by a developer to support development in North Old Town. The Potomac Interceptor, if you think about the location and its route, you'll see a picture on the bottom left of your slide. That picture is located near Pendleton Street. Potomac Interceptor was mainly routed to, if you think about it, before these interceptors, you just had sanitary sewage going directly into the Potomac at various outfall sites along the Potomac River. So the Potomac Interceptor, like our tunnel, followed the shoreline, captured all of those sanitary sewer overflows, and brought it down to the plant. So it was routed as far east as possible, capture the overflows, and bring the flows to the plant. At outfall 1 is where we had a regulator built then to deal with the combined sewer overflows. The Commonwealth Interceptor pretty much followed the low point of, I'll call it the Commonwealth Valley or the Commonwealth Avenue Valley. It was built at that location because that's where the sewers had drained to. So the main trunk line interceptor is connecting into all of those existing pipelines to bring flows to the plant. And then Holmes Run Trunk Sewer, if you think about it, it follows Cameron Run. The purpose of Holmes Run Trunk Sewer is to get the west end of Alexandria and also connect in Fairfax County to pick up Fairfax County flows. There's 2 pipelines there today. There's Fairfax County trunk side of Holmes Run Trunk Sewer, as well as the Alexandria Holmes Run Trunk Sewer. And they're following the low point of Holmes Run to get flows down to the plant. So if you'll see in the pictures, Holmes Run Trunk Sewer, when it was built, it was largely built through wooded areas. And then Commonwealth was built in a main road that goes through Delray in the community. You can see that in the bottom right. Pictures back up here as well. You can see some of the homes existed back then. But for the other majority of Potomac Interceptor and Holmes Run, through primarily wooded land along streams and shorelines. with the exception of Potomac up near Pendleton. Pumping stations are a little bit different story. The only pumping station that was built when we first took over operation was the 4 Mile Run pump station. That was built in 1954, and it's the only pumping station we operated until the late 90s. 4 Mile Run's on the back side of Caton, on the other side of the hill, and captures flows that cannot be delivered to Alex Renew by gravity. So they flow to 4 Mile Run at one of those potential locations of the treatment plant, and then they're pumped up to Caton, then it goes by gravity down the Commonwealth Avenue to Alex Renew. Make this really short. The remaining pump stations, Slater's Lane, Potomac Yard, Mark Center, and Innovation District, were all built by developers. And they were all built to support development, and they received a significant amount of community input as the development process was ongoing. And you can see the results. The Innovation District pump station is our newest pump station, located right next to Virginia Tech campus. Potomac Yard pump station is integrated in the Potomac Yard neighborhood. Across the railroad tracks, you'll find the Slater's Lane pump station. And then Mark Center was just put in to send flows from the BRAC to Arlington. So the community input process for the majority of these pump stations came through the city's DSUP process. And, you know, the most recent pump station, you know, we've got educational elements as well as green amounts of the roof. That Ms. Waters will walk through here.
A question about that. For all the pump stations, the full construction cost was covered by our rates and debt and debt?
No, which ones?
Say the last three,
These?
last three.
They were all paid by the developer.
Totally paid for.
The only one that was funded by Alex Renew was.
First.
And it's the one we'll talk about the most tonight because it is in a disadvantaged community. So we did focus on that one a bit more.
They paid for it and send them to you guys to operate.
Correct. Operate, maintain, it's our asset. The only one we don't, regular maintenance on, but we're operated as the Mark Center. There's a maintenance agreement with the BRAC on Mark Center. It's a discussion for a later time. We'd like to turn that off, let the flows go up to gravity. Talk about that later. So, there's water.
Okay, so earlier, Mr. Carl referenced these evaluation criteria, and there's some overlap here, but let me go through the various categories. So first, we have the environmental and health impacts. So there we're looking at things like odor, air pollution, noise, overflows, and then assessing health risks associated with our infrastructure and operations. So like respiratory issues, exposure to pollutants, access to services and benefits. These criteria are meant to identify disparities in how we invest on our infrastructure or maintenance. Economic and social burden looks at potential displacement, property devaluation, reduced quality of life. So this is where there's overlap. If you have noise from some of our infrastructure, that could affect quality of life. And then we broke out rates from economic and social burden. We could have lumped this together, but we have it set out with community outreach, and that's analyzing the impact of our rates on low-income residents or EJ communities. And then finally, you got a presentation last month on our communication efforts, our outreach efforts. So we are reviewing those efforts to ensure that our communications are accessible. All right, next slide. Will you go back, Lorna? So these criteria, we may rework them a little bit, but this was important for the assessment looking at our existing infrastructure, but moving forward, we will also use criteria like this as we're doing our capital planning, as we're evaluating the areas that we're going to see in the mapping exercise to make sure that we're not having a disparate impact on each of you. Okay, next slide. All right, here's our infrastructure. And if you go one click, Florida, we're going to get SNAP. So that is where we have high utilization of SNAP at 6 to 8%. Next click will be our, so this comes from EPA EJ Screen, which is now, you can no longer access this information because we will want to do this exercise on a somewhat, regular basis to check to see if these areas change. So right now we don't have access to EJ Screen. I don't know if you've heard anything this summer, but I do think that there are some groups that are trying to replicate the data that was present there. So hopefully we will soon be able to access something similar. So this is looking at low income layer, and this would be where a majority are making less than 2 times the national poverty level, which is 31,000 for a family of 4. So next would be the CDC vulnerability. One more click. Okay, so you can see we're getting these areas. So CDC is this light blue. And the CDC uses 15 different criteria to evaluate how communities can respond to disasters, how they can recover from disasters. So they look at socioeconomic status, which is unemployment, poverty level, housing cost burden, high school diploma, health insurance. They look at household characteristics for households over 65, under 18, disability, single parent households, English language proficiency. They look at racial and ethnic minority status, and they look at housing type and transportation. So that would be multi-unit structures, mobile homes, and whether they have a vehicle. So then the last layer, another click. Okay, so this shows this was also from EPA EJ Screen. This is the particulate matter, diesel particulate matter overlay. This orange indicates moderate, and the lighter yellow is low. And we wanted to look at this in relation to our hauling routes. And here we have on the map, we have our ferric hauling route to and from. This doesn't show to or from, but this, I think this is go. How's it go? Let's see here. Ferric, we go to the plant 495 to Stovall Street to Eisenhower Avenue to Holland Lane. From the plant, it goes from Holland Lane to Duke Street and then to South Henry Street to the bridge. For our methanol, which is the green dotted line, will you click one more? There it goes. So that hauling route to the plant, 495 to Eisenhower to Holland. From the plant is Holland to Duke to Telegraph, the 495 entrance. And then the last click should be so this is where Synagro hauls when they pick up our biosolids, when they pick up our grit, and they go to the plant from 495 to Eisenhower to Holland, and from the plant, Eisenhower to Stovall to Mill Road to Telegraph, and then the entrance to 495. So what this tells us is that we're not seeing any increased localized diesel particulate matter as a result of our trucking. We have about 30 trucks per week. Justin, you said that during our tunneling project, we had 170 trucks per day, and that was not considered to have a large impact. So our trucking routes are not that heavily trafficked, so we have 30 per week. So this
You're
is
tracking, your hauling routes are permitted by VDOT. You apply for a permit and they tell you, this is your hauling. Submit an MOU.
Yeah. No.
How you do it?
We coordinated our routes permit to the city, but once you hit 495, there's.
It's a city.
VDOT
The city
doesn't have
does
any,
local roads,
basically, cities have responsibilities for roads, unlike Fairfax, where it's VDOT. In case of Virginia cities, it's the city, other than state numbered routes. They have some maintenance
But you
responsibility.
apply for it and they tell you, this is the route we want to take.
So for now, these are the areas then that we are going to be considering as EJ communities. And we're gonna look at our existing infrastructure and then we'll talk about how we'll use this moving forward. In December, we talked about this. Brown and Caldwell, they conducted these listening sessions as part of the assessment. So they sat down and interviewed 12 of our staff across all departments and went through decision-making, how we track success and data, looking at our culture, customer service practices, staff training, hiring, recruitment, and retention. And then they use this data from the listening sessions to identify our strengths and also the opportunities. Okay, next. Programs and policy reviews. This was their desktop exercise. They did a very comprehensive review of these board policies and staff policies, looking for, again, strengths and opportunities. So here's just a few of them. Board policies, operating capital budget, our HR policies, procurement documents, and our strategic plan. All right, next slide. Outcomes. So now we get into the actual matrix of evaluating our existing infrastructure. And this is just actually, this is pretty high level summary. It's more detailed in our matrix. So this takes the criteria that we already discussed, starting with the environmental factors of odor, noise, air pollution, overflows, and infrastructure failures. It's not up here, but one thing that we looked at was our regulatory compliance. For our plant, we had a recent inspection by DEQ, and they looked at Clean Water Act operations, but also looked at our air permit, and there were no non-compliance issues noted there. That happens every 2 years. This time they didn't go out to look at the outfalls, but typically they do. Our interceptors, we have our employees inspect those and we look at those. I think, what is that? We had them inspect the diversion chambers monthly and the manholes annually. And we've had all of our interceptors CCTV work done within the last 7 years. For the pumping stations, those are inspected weekly, and then our CSO outfalls, those are inspected weekly as well for obstructions. And as I mentioned, DEQ typically looks at those every 2 years. So now going across, well, with compliance, we have 100% permit compliance at the plant for the last 5 years. For these two interceptors pumping stations, they comply with the sewage collection and treatment regs, the SCAT regs. And then our CSO outfalls will be, they're designed and permitted to meet the water quality standards in the CSO policy. So moving into odor. Looking at the wastewater treatment plant, we have very robust odor control and we've had no complaints. For the interceptors, no complaints on odors. For pumping stations, 4 Mile Run, we did have some odor complaints in 2019. Those were during some upgrades that we were doing, and we have not had complaints since then. For the CSO outfalls, we have dampers and odor control units at the drop shafts, and I'm not anticipating any odor issues there. For air pollution, the plant complies with a clean air permit. Our hauling routes do not pass through EJ communities, and I already went over our truck traffic. Interceptors, it's not applicable. There's nothing that would contribute to air pollution. For 4 Mile Run, which we saw from the previous map, it's in an EJ area. We do have some limited emissions when we're operating the generator, which is only for 30 minutes each week. But that also meets our Clean Air Act permit, the Tier 4 permit requirements. CSO outfalls, no issue, not applicable for air pollution. If you have any questions, stop me during this. Noise, no noise complaints at the plant. Our construction work has to comply with the city's noise ordinance. No complaints for the interceptors. No complaints on the pumping stations, but we will go over. We went out and did readings at all of our pump stations, and we did have one reading at 4 Mile Run that was slightly above the residential level of 55 decibels. And then for the CSO outfalls, those are passive, no moving parts, no noise. Looking at overflows, wastewater plant, we don't have any overflows or infrastructure failures. For interceptors, they all provide adequate level of service per our regulatory standards, no reported overflows in EJ communities. And for 4 Mile Run pumping station, there have been some sanitary overflows near 4 Mile Run. Yes, and that's not due to the capacity of the pumping station. It's due to the city's inflow and infiltration from the collection system. For the plant, we have all outfalls are designed to meet the water quality goals, designed for future climate conditions. And so then looking at are there disparate impacts? So we didn't identify disparate impacts from the wastewater treatment plant nor at the interceptors. Pumping stations with the upgrades that have been done for 4 Mile Run, we have addressed and mitigated those past impacts with odor, and we've increased capacity, and no disparate impacts identified for the outfalls. We'll get into disparate impacts with the health risks. So now moving down to this row. For health risks, we have for all of these three, the wastewater plant, the interceptors, and the pumping station. Those are designed, operated, and maintained to prevent human exposure. At the plant, we have a very strong safety and security plan that we implement. When we're looking at overflows, they do, of course, pose a risk in receiving waters. And how we're mitigating that risk is through the public notification system, which will have signage and a real-time website. So that's designed to prevent any exposure. And then we're mitigating that risk through the reduction of overflow. Any question on this one before we go to the next?
I mean, that's the future state of river renewable. It had to.
Yeah.
The website uses real-time data. That's one to like that, if we have an overflow event.
Okay, next. This is 4 Mile Run. This is what I referenced. Had a 57 reading. The pump station is here. Let's read what is here, Carl. We're in this area.
There's an apartment complex down to your bottom.
This.
Yeah.
So this is something that we will likely continue to monitor because we had a hit at 57, but it's basically background noise, and we've not had any complaints of noise.
Yeah, so if you look at the 53 and the 49, we measured it with the generator running and with it. So it runs every Tuesday for 30 minutes. We captured these runs when you look at A and B. A is not running, B is running. And, 53 decibel limits, when you look at the city's noise ordinance for residential, 55 dBA would be like your heat pump outside your home. So it's similar to that noise level for 30 minutes. Sam, I think you asked the question, what's it like? What's it like living near a pump station? Well, if you got close enough, you might hear generator running once a week for 30 minutes. But we do that run just so it's exercise. So when it was powerful.
Reading, you guys are making these reading continuously.
No, we went out and did the handheld.
Just did the sampling for this exercise.
Could we spend a moment on that, though? I had to study the city ordinance for noise in my neighborhood because there was some construction. I think the ordinance says 55 decibels within 50 feet. And those distances are much greater than.
Yeah, I think you're down at 53. The only one where you hit it is, and that's zone residential. This isn't zone residential.
Okay.
Zone commercial industrial stuff. But
You don't think these are within 50 feet here?
Oh, I mean, that's
I'm bad at
100 yards.
this.
I
Okay,
think the closest one would be the dotted lines.
Yeah,
right.
that's,
Okay.
yeah.
one thing that we'll have to keep an eye on is the school's plan at some point. I don't know, we probably have a couple of years at least until they start planning of rebuilding Core Kelly. And they have a floodplain issue they got to deal with, but if they do rebuild there, I think is their current plan, we may find their building coming closer to us. Because they need, at least they've projected, looking ahead, we'll need additional seats and to expand the school, as well as try not to close down the school completely during the renovation process, which means use the empty space to do something. So we'll just have to watch that one.
Now, those generators would only run for an extended period if there was a power outage, correct?
They,
Let me test that.
they get run every week, just.
As a test. Yeah.
Just to make sure, they'll work when we need them.
And it is permitted. They are permitted.
Next slide.
I don't know, Ms. Hammer, we're trying to capture what's the likelihood of living here.
Yeah, no, that's super helpful.
A heck of a lot of.
Great.
I
I
would,
would know those DBA ones are a lot, well.
right, but I'd encourage you, Ms. Hammer, if you're interested, to stop by on a Tuesday afternoon to hear it.
And what time does it turn on? Not
Yeah.
gonna- not gonna
Set
do
your
that.
watch.
I'm a job, So
I don't. I'll make a day of it.
you can go, you can
It's
go and
hard
tell me how it is.
You know, the background, it's hard to pick it up.
Yeah.
You know, you're sitting there with a mic.
I know.
And, you know, trying to.
And frankly, you're in the jetway of National Airport anyway.
I know.
Which I'm sure eclipses that noise.
I mean, we opened the doors on it, you know, tried a bunch of stuff trying to. see if it had a big
Make it louder, crank it up really high.
Okay, good. That's good. Thank you.
Okay, the next category, access to services and benefits, really looking at our investments and if there are any disparities there. For the plant interceptors pumping station, level of service, we provide the level of service that benefits the entire system. CSOs, we will provide the level of service to comply with CSO policy and our permit, our water quality goals. Basis for investments for the plant, past investments made to meet permit requirements and manage assets. Then we're going into phase forward, looking forward to upgrade critical wastewater processes. And so for the interceptors, past investments and maintenance has been based on useful life of the asset. For 4 Mile Run, we had upgrades in 2016, 2019, 2024, and I think there were a few more that you just showed me earlier. Those were educational signage and increased capacity work that we've done there. And then for CSO Outfall, we've done the investment in Old Town. It's going to benefit the entire region, and the community benefited all those sites. So disparate investments, we really did not identify any disparate investments made. Any questions on this one? Okay, let's move to the next one, which is displacement. Displacement, property devaluation, and reduced quality of life. Wastewater plant, as Mr. Carl said, it was built on the former city landfill site, no displacement. For the interceptors, those were built within public rights of way, industrial undeveloped areas, so we don't know of any displacements for those. Pumping stations, you saw from his presentation that we cited 4 Mile Run in reclaimed land marsh area away from residential property. The Marks Center is in an EJ area, but it's located in that military building. Innovation District is close to an EJ area, and that was built in the undeveloped area, so we don't have any identified displacements for the pumping stations and none for the CSO outfalls. Looking at property devaluation, and this was something that Mr. Jinks, you just sent an email about the language that we had used about the wastewater treatment plant high income, low diversity area. So when you look in the area that you were talking about to the east. Thank you. So if you look back before the turn of the century, then we had a lower income and more diversity in that area. And what's happened in the last 25 years is it's been gentrified and the income has changed significantly. So looking at the income from 2000 to 2010, MHI in that census tract increased from 42,000 to 80,000. And the current census data has it as 142,000. So it's in the range of what we see in South Old Town.
I appreciate getting the information. It helps. One of the problems, as you pointed out, is census tracts. We don't get to draw the lines and say, for example, we can say Payne, Wilkes, Route 1. It's the neighborhood within that that is basically was a historically Black, lower middle income neighborhood. It is gentrified, I'd say only to some degree. And the problem with the income levels is that a lot of the measurement areas go all the way up to Duke Street and go over across Route 1 and down. And it's a problem. It's anytime we have to deal with averages, on average it's higher, but this is still a neighborhood I think we need to pay. It may not fall within twice national poverty level, but I think it's a neighborhood, clearly we don't run trucks through it, degree we can avoid it. And it occurred to me, we don't have, do we, one of us assigned to liaison with the Civic Association there? Old Town claims everything, so it may be, I'm thinking, maybe we ought to, I'd be glad to do it. If there's still a Civic Association there, just kind of add them to the list of people we keep in contact with.
And what you said is it's absolutely an area we should focus on. LEAP.
Yeah, if you look at the LEAP numbers, there are a couple of statistics in the attachment you sent me from the city's, has a lot of maps in it, the city's demographic review, that neighborhood pops out a little bit more than most of Old Town, with the exception of where the public housing is in the north part of Old Town.
Yeah. And that's something we should do with that mapping exercise, is try to get more granular as we have more additional information. So we are targeting the right areas for assessment of impacts moving forward, but also for LEAP prevention. Okay, so then looking at the evaluation, we did not find evaluation near the plant or the interceptors. They've got little to no footprint, so no indication of evaluation there. Pumping stations, developments for construction of our pumping stations, which are integrated into the community. Didn't identify any there. And then for the CSO outfalls, significant community involvement went into siting those, and we're in a affluent area that has been burdened with the construction that is going on, has gone on. And most of those facilities are located below grade. All of them are sites restored to benefit community. For quality of life, looking across, while we didn't identify quality of life impacts, negative quality impacts for the plant, we identified positive ones, and that it was constructed for community benefits with the soccer field and this room, this floor. The interceptors were constructed to get the flow to our plant, so really integral part of the system. Pumping stations, the overflows that I mentioned earlier would have potential quality of life issues for anybody recreating these streams if they should be doing that during a rain event. But that again, this is not an engineering solution, it's a city I&I issue. And then for the CSOs, we already covered that there are quality of life impacts from overflows, and we're working to address them through the River Renew project and then also through the notification system to let people know when they should not be using the water bodies. All right, so that's all on this one. And I don't know if you go to the next slide. So now we get to rates and outreach. We spent a lot of time talking about rates during the retreat, so I think we all recognize that our rates went up because of River Renew and that there is a disproportionate burden on low-income communities, but we are trying to mitigate that burden. We worked on reducing the rate shock through the low-interest funding. We continue to lobby for additional state grant funding. And then we have our payment assistance programs that we were implementing, such as LEAP. So it's going to be an ongoing effort to mitigate the impacts of our rates. I won't spend much time at all on outreach efforts because you had an excellent presentation last month on all of our outreach, but the assessment is that we're going to increase targeted engagement in EJ communities and other communities that we've identified that may be able to take better advantage of LEAP, and then solicit more input on rates and investments. Okay. So then with all of this, we took the strategic goals, our strategic plan, our 5 strategic goal areas, and we looked at our strengths and looked at our opportunities. And for operational excellence, strength is we're utilizing compliance tracking, we're maintaining our permit compliance, we're data-driven, we're benchmarking. An opportunity is that we can start using these criteria in the mapping exercise to look at our investments moving forward, look at our capital planning, our projects moving forward to make sure that we are not having disparate impacts. So that will take the form of checklists, SOPs, and we'll be working to incorporate that into our processes.
I think it's a good point, something you all see every year is our budget. We have a project contingency in our budget. One way to incorporate that finding is to update our budget. To have an either checklist or description or narrative that forces the engineers and staff working on the program to think about EJ if it's not organic. A lot of consultants doing work for us that will help them guide them in the right direction to think about impacts of EJ. And we have these tools that we just discussed this evening that I could reference EJ.
Thriving workforce, we foster an inclusive work environment. We look to recruit a talent from diverse backgrounds. And what can we do to improve? We can expand our apprenticeship program and look to do so in EJ communities, and develop internal manager training programs. Part of what I think we're going to talk about this a little bit at our next staff meeting, but given that EJ and DEI has been weaponized recently, trying to explain again what this means, why we're doing it, how this is still very relevant and it's not illegal. So we'll be talking to our employees about that. Strategic partnerships, we do a good job collaborating with environmental focus groups. We have strong partnerships locally, regionally, but we can continue to leverage and expand those partnerships, particularly to reach EJ communities. What we've been doing with the Alexandria Soccer Association, I think it's just started. They reach a lot more people than we do in the community. The more we can collaborate with them, they're a trusted entity, so they can really get the word out on LEAP and our other payment programs. So we'll work with them, and we'll continue to try to lobby for additional grant money from the General Assembly to help offset costs. Sustainability, we prioritize sustainability. We integrate it already into our projects, but we can do more, strengthening our policies and procedures to ensure that EJ is overlaid on all of our capital investments, procurement, and workforce initiatives, and that they support sustainability and climate resilience. For commitment to the community, we already do extensive engagement, as we heard last month, but we'll try to expand participation in our customer assistance programs, targeting those EJ communities and other areas that we identify. Okay. Any questions on that? Next slide. What are our lessons learned? We We engaged Brown and Caldwell to assist us with this assessment, but in learning, when we started this, I was overseeing them. I did not know much about how to do an EJ assessment. And there's not a book out there that you can go to. There really is no one size fits all. So it's really something where you have to know your infrastructure, and trying to outsource it and not be involved is not an option for coming to a good result. So really trying to leverage that internal expertise if you're working with a consultant to make sure that we're covering all bases. Engaging department heads, involving the board early and often. Ms. Hammer, I also want to thank you for your feedback last time. I think that showed us that there was a lot more that we could do. And I feel like we've taken this a long way since then. Next steps are important. So what are we going to do with all this information? Given that we're already looking at this from a strategic goal standpoint, we're going to come up with the items that we feel like we need to accomplish and work those into our strategic goals and our KPIs. We'll budget accordingly. Monitoring accountability is going to be important to make sure that we report that back to the board and the community, and that we keep ourselves on track with these initiatives. And then we need to communicate with stakeholders. Mr. Carl, you want to add anything?
I don't want to lose a very important point that Mr. Jenks made, that as we do more LEAP, we're getting a clearer picture of where some of our ratepayers are struggling. I'm thinking we might want to use that intelligence in how we assign, as Mr. Jenks said, a board member to monitor a civic association. I think, we do cover the big associations with the Federation, and Mr. Beal covers Delray. But I think the more struggling areas are not represented by those associations. Certainly not the Federation. Something to think of. I mean, yeah. Because as that LEAP map fills out, it is identifying where we have problems.
Yeah, and if we look where people are utilizing LEAP and the map with the overlays, they do line up.
Wait till we get to the LEAP discussion with him tonight, but yeah, good.
But we do have to continue to fine tune that map, make sure that we are doing all the.
Good.
All right, thank you.
Can I just say thank you?
Oh,
to John
absolutely.
For doing this.
Absolutely.
I mean, I was the one who basically told him to do it. No, this is really, really excellent. And I just want to acknowledge how important it is, especially right now, to be doing this when our federal environmental justice staff have been all laid off. Like, this is just, it's never more important for us at the local level to be thinking about these issues. So thank you. It's a really excellent job.
Moving on to new business and update on process optimization. Mr. Carl.
Mr. Jan going to provide an overview of optimization. That's our way forward term publicly facing term for our nitrate pretreatment process. We're bringing this to the board this evening. We worked through the selection of qualified contractors. We're expecting bids. Update on what we're doing, so we had that one. Okay.
Reintroducing myself, my name is Kyle Chan. I'm one of the engineers here at Algeну. I've been the project manager for the process optimization project. So I'll be going through quick outline, next few slides that we'll be going through an overview of the process itself. Process optimization is focused on centric pretreatment. We'll go into detail on what that constitutes. We'll go over the project approach and scope, and then we'll finish up with the timeline to show our next steps. As a reminder, process optimization is part of our phase forward umbrella of projects, along with headworks renewal, biosolids diversification, and nutrient reduction. Unlike the headworks renewal and biosolids diversification projects, which are both being delivered via CMAR, process optimization is a little more contained. It's a relatively simpler project, so we're delivering this via more conventional design bid build with a pre-qualification step. Time. I believe you've all seen this slide before, but just another overview of the treatment plant and the general location of all of our major current and upcoming projects. Process optimization is located up in kind of the north center in building 69, where Century Pretreatment is. Next slide. So can't really talk about the process without talking about our denitrifying red bugs, Anammox. Anammox is a naturally occurring bacteria that helps us to shortcut the nitrogen removal process, converting ammonia, which is a contained form of nitrogen in wastewater, and converting that into nitrogen gas that can just be freely released into the atmosphere. Why this is important is shortcutting that process that saves us chemicals and reduces the oxygen demand for treating that wastewater. That increases our overall energy efficiency, and then by spreading out that load to more specialized processes and reducing the load on more critical equipment, that also improves the overall plant reliability, and that itself also leads to cost savings. Next slide. So the location of Century Pretreatment in our treatment process is it's kind of in the middle and jumping from solids back into liquids. So after our solids go through anaerobic digestion and our equalization tanks, they go through our dewatering centrifuges. The solids from that dewater solids continue on to the solids handling process to land application. While the water removed from those centrates, or removed from the centrifuges, centrate, needs to be returned to the liquid stream for further treatment. Now, this water, the centrate, has an extremely high ammonia content. It's a relatively small stream, but that waste stream constitutes roughly 20% of our total nitrogen load that would be going to the BRBs. So rather than send that directly to the BRBs, we send that into Century Pretreatment, let our red bugs do their work, remove the majority of that ammonia, and then send that pre-treated water into the BRBs for the rest of the liquid treatment. This process was originally commissioned in 2015. Halleck Renew was actually one of the first users of this technology in North America. There were a few installations in Europe, but at the time this was pretty cutting edge technology. Because it was relatively new, we included additional systems for alternate nitrogen removal processes, just in the event that Anammox didn't work the way we wanted it to. This did add complexity to the system, though. So in 2019, after a series of upsets and restarts, we had to deactivate the system with a plan to reseed it with new Anammox. And due to operational issues with clogging, some of the equipment was deformed, and then the restarting the system was very labor intensive for our operations staff. Unfortunately, plans to restart the system during 2019 and 2020 were put on hold due to the outbreak of the pandemic, and then the imminent start of River Renew construction. So the plan to get the system back up and running had to get pushed back until we had the space for it. Slide. Which brings us to today. This slide gives an overview of some of the improvements, the major improvements that we're doing to optimize Century Pretreatment. The Anammox screens are replacing our old hydrocyclones, which had an issue of clogging and failures. These new parabolic screens have no moving parts. It's just a screen to catch the Anammox granules and let the treated water fall through and return the Anammox back to the treatment process. Our blower systems are being optimized to match the current loads, the expected loads of the system. And then we have a new, more open tank layout. including new flat, more efficient aeration panels that will allow more space for our maintenance crews to go into the tanks and clean it without having to worry about damaging the panels. And then another major change is that the previous CPT design relied on was a batch treatment process. So we fill the tank, treat the water, and then decant it. So there would be the filling and the decant process where we technically weren't treating the water. The new system is going to be using a flow-through equipment. So it's we're putting a lower flow of water into the tank, but consistently treating it and sending the water out. And that gives us both more capacity and more efficient process. To address the clogging that we had experienced previously, we're implementing fine debris screens just upstream of all the new equipment, just to make sure that anything that gets through the centrifuges doesn't make its way into the new process and clog that equipment. And then, of course, we're continuing to use Animox or red bugs. They did right by us before, and that's we base design around continuing to use them. So this slide gives us the estimated capital cost of the centrifuge treatment process or project. The design cost is already actualized. These are actual costs that have been incurred by Atrenu. We're at 100% design. Design services during construction and the construction management services are both rough order of estimates from our design consultant and our construction manager respectively. And then the construction cost is our class 1 engineer's estimate, which is, I believe, -10 or -15 or +10%. Next slide. And then lastly, a timeline to show where we are in the process. In November 2024, we issued the invitation to pre-qualify documents. And then in January of this year, we issued bid documents before pre-qualified respondents. We're expecting the bids to be submitted on March 11th. So we'll have those, have a selected contractor ready to recommend for board approval at the March board meeting. Pending that approval, we're looking at notice to proceed in April, and then a roughly 16-month construction timeline to finish construction in August of 2026. Next slide. I believe that's the end of my presentation.
So you said you're gonna shortlist, it's a design bid build that you shortlist?
We would need Cambridge engineer and then pre-qualified. So we've already pre-qualified 4 to 5 contracts based on things we just through one of the contracts. So they were pre-qualified. Honestly, kind of found it right now. So we're not pre-qualified. So it's not a short list. It's a strict questionnaire that they put out and maybe determination, but not.
They are,
So it's like your pass, fail, and short.
they are the one who's gonna submit the bids. These are the ones who's gonna submit bids. Who's gonna do construction management?
Under Schnabel, Brown, Hubble.
We approved.
Are there any questions, more questions from the board?
Yeah. This raises a question about probably more than just this particular construction contract. And that is, what performance guarantees do we get when we're putting all these steps in the process and equipment so that we get to the end, we know that it's working as it should? Is there performance guarantees the contractor, or how do we, if it doesn't perform as the way we think it's going to, is there some redress that we have back to the design folks or the contractor?
In this design big billboard, but we'll end up with working with, if there's an issue with the equipment will be covered through the warranty process. These are some of the minimum renewal warranty. We're dealing with a lot of that right now with our blowers. And we have on-site support still from the contractor and manufacturer. This is solid similar to where the manufacturer provides service.
If the designer, so it's really the contractor's basing it on specifications the designer developed. And so that's how the contractor's measured, performance is measured to do what was in that design. Question is if the end of the day, the equipment all works, but the water isn't as clean by however we're measuring it at the end of that process, do we have, is,
They're gonna commission it and test it before they turn it to you guys.
Yeah, just the recourse and something like that. would be-
we don't accept it until,
Well, so for when the system's done, Mr. Chen had it, part of what we do is, before we accept turnover. Before you accept the system of turnover, there's a commissioning period. And you have to accept the equipment at that period. If there's something that happens to the equipment because of, going operations, that can be harmful. But if you're asking the question, if there's a design flaw, or it's something that was lack of oversight or during the design process, the only way to get back to a designer for engineering error, which is different when you think about a progressive design build, we will get more performance guarantees under that umbrella. But it's just different given the structure of the way we procure the product.
You can also put on your specification when they commission it, they run it for a period of time to make sure it is working and then turn it back.
okay, good, thank you.
Any other questions from the board? Mr. Chen, very good presentation. It shed a lot of light on the
Thank
topic.
you.
I've got one question going back to your first slide. You don't have to show the slide. But first slide, we did say that this technology, Redbud, is rarely used or was rarely used back in 2017. Is it in more widespread use today?
We, like, during the process of design, we actually reached out to several other treatment process plants just in this region. And we really received a lot of feedback. Some of our operators actually had come from HRSD, had a lot of experience running, running their animal systems there. So it is a much more established technology now.
Okay, so good. I was worried back in 2017. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. Moving right along to 2025 initiatives, Mr. Carl. I will gladly, unless the board wishes to go over it. We've got a lot to cover.
A policy review. We got increased line of credit.
This can wait. And also, this is pretty self-explanatory. We can table it.
It's up to the board, but I'm just I'm looking at. Trying to work a little.
Yeah,
It's fine.
you want to go over?
No, it's fine to move along or
Move-
whatever.
Okay, let's move
Either
on
way,
to,
either way.
yeah, we'll move to part. Let's move it to the board policy. Oh, wait. Move to table item B. For second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, Counselor. Moving on to board policy on CMAR.
So I'll make this really short. There's a memo that's going pretty well. Every December, after the General Assembly adopt new procedures, the Virginia Secretary puts out a guidance document for CMAR design build in Virginia. We've updated policy, provides the board of red lines to make minor changes to
our policy based on those red lines. And we've also reduced the amount of design necessary to procure a design builder. Typically on a fixed, it was written down fixed price design build before, it had a 30% time. We've lowered that design to a level appropriate, deemed appropriate by the authority. That is to allow us to procure a production design builder like a 5.
So it's barely is a concept.
Everybody seen the red line version?
Yeah.
Red line version is very clear what they've changed. Is there any discussion from the board? Good.
Finally.
Ironic, coming from this current administration.
Yeah.
Right? Wait, what happened?
Is there,
Did they get hit on the
Follow
head?
the law.
if there's no discussion, is there a motion to approve? Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Continuing to move along, this one is a very important one. Line of credit, increasing our line of credit.
So,
Please provide the context for this, because I think it's interesting.
I guess I'll live about $130 million left to spend on River Connect. Probably will shy right now. That we processed around 12 last month. So what happened 2 weeks ago is, we've had a federal freeze on funding. At this point, the only funding we have left available to use for the River New project is our Lithia loan, this BPA. We've completely expended everything from water volume fund and all associated grants. We received the job, but that solely leaves our clean water revolving, our BPA Lithia loan. So it was our understanding, as well as EPA's understanding, that the funding was frozen, leaving us with no ability to continue to fund the job after we spent all the cash and spent down our $60 million fund. So given the situation that we've had now, this is the third time that we've had our Lithia fund potentially impacted by something that happened. Government, whether it be the government shutdown or funding freeze. Therefore, we felt it was in our best interest to increase our line of credit to $120 million. It's doubling the current line of credit with Bank of America and giving us enough credit to pay the design builder in the event that we face another or lose our funding altogether. If we were to pivot to funding the job through a line of credit, or change, which is much higher than what we want. I think when we did the interview with Politico, we mentioned that would be an $80 million hit to our overall debt service. So our interest rate is important. If we want to go with it on the live, but we don't lose it, we've got to be able to take the job, turn the line of credit in the short term, and lock the funding off and base some funds for River New, but none of it's going to carry one. So the ask is, is to increase line of credit from 60 to $120 million. And that results in a $150,000 increase. But as soon as we get through the risk portion of River Renewal, we'll likely dial that back down to 60 million and keep it intact. In the future, for another renewal to include for the phase 4. It's helpful to have that vision. But right now, we just want to make sure we get the.
Very good context. Questions from the board?
Yes. Do we understand that Bank of America will approve this? Thank you.
One question on the interest rate, how is that set? Is that weekly variable rate set, so it changes over the life of the draw? Or is it set at the time of the draw? Could be different depending on when the draws are done. How's that? Good, thank you. Any questions? I move the resolution be approved.
Absolutely, absolutely.
The heading for the resolution, I think it has.
It is $120 billion, yeah.
Really?
I don't
Thank
think
you
we need
for-
that much.
Rob, thank you very much for saving us.
Can we note that we'll update the title of resolution 2501 to finance it up to $120 million. For the 3 years period. On council, trying to pull that on.
Maybe this is a line of credit for the federal government.
Thank you. Is there any predictions on what could happen with Whitfield? It's just still totally up in the air.
We're gonna put a requisition in. today.
Is the web portal back up? Where you can go to request your,
Yeah, and I will say that we
it was
have,
down, right?
others who have put in requests the day of, when the letter came out initially, and they have been funded for now.
Good luck.
Okay. And there is a motion by Mr. Jenks, second by Mr. Beal. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Can you have a look at? Updated and then-
Then you want to sign?
Yeah.
60 million. Good, good. Okay. From that note to a much cheerier note, it's time for the 2025 Ellen Pickering Environmental Excellence Award and staffing out the selection committee. That honor generally goes to the newest member, Dr. Wone. He graciously accepts. And I understand there's a tree planting involved. And Ms. Hammer has done this, so she can provide
The shovel.
any guidance you need.
I didn't get to plant the tree. I only presented the award. So I have no tree planting advice whatsoever. But I'm sure you can handle.
The roots on the downside, that's all you need.
Will do. We'll be happy.
And do, assume we need a motion for that. So I would move that Dr. Wone be our board member on the selection committee. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Hammer. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, monthly outcomes on tab 9.
We'll receive a phone call and email from Rich Brindell, who was. Yeah.
The last name?
Yes, if-
Keep an eye out for that. It's usually a pretty low left and maybe that much was called. Pretty low. And,
That's pretty quick.
big media event. So you'll have to have remarks ready and everything.
All of city council typically.
It's a lot of fun. The process and the ceremony itself. is a lot of fun.
Good. Monthly outcomes. Mr. Carl.
Going through the monthly report on page 2, we did get our December results back from feedback sessions, so we're reporting on new numbers from our website. You see the average is down now to 1.4 and 15.7 for people on peak off. And then concentration of billion. I do want to give you a heads up that we were FOIA for our biosolid data. And there will be an article issued in the Richmond Times Dispatch on Sunday. We've spoken to it's not a focus on land application and land permit expansion in Westmoreland County. The reporter did get a FOIA'd us. So had a few questions about the concentration. We know the building sites pavilion. And we also were able to get in some solid talk components around what we're doing as one entity and also how we're collaborating in the region to look at sustainable ways to manage. So look for that article on Sunday. Don't be surprised if you see our concentration type activity. It is investigative, so we'll find that. And that's it. I already mentioned IPQ. I do want to mention this. We haven't talked about this as a region. You can hear about participation in this. In January, we issued a request for proposal for professional engineering services to conduct a regional health study. County counties and regional authorities. We had a kickoff meeting with potential proposers last month. Proposals are due next week on February 15th, and we're anticipating securing that contract with board approval. And that household approach to the regional facility option is guaranteed at 100%. But we'll then do these fundraising authorities based on the file population. We'll keep bringing that to the board for approval. We did set a not to exceed limit on this study. And we'll be reimbursed. On page 3, bottom of page 3, as we mentioned, when we approved the PLA task orders, we are now outlining the solid task orders in the report. Include tertiary systems upgrade. We have a owner's advisor. Moving forward, we have some general engineering services, PFAS sampling support, and then we have engineering services for inspection. Moving down to strategic partnerships under page 4, bottom of the page, I'll send them in water to update on the project.
General Assembly will adjourn this Saturday, and they're going to reconvene on April 2nd to review provisions that the governor sent. Two bills that one that we've been monitoring, Senate Bill 1319, discussed this last month. This is going to require certain industrial sources, wastewater sources to self-report use of PFAS. We're already planning to sample all of our industrial users, so we will have completed this by the time it even rolls around for us to do this retreat program. That was approved today, and the other one is the Virginia Public Procurement Act, Senate Bill 962. It passed along party lines today. And this is the one that calls for all competitively bid construction projects to require 8% of the total labor hours to be performed by apprentices. It has two possible waivers for local public bodies, for both are impractical. The first one talks about demonstrated lack of availability of apprentices. And that would require us in a pre-bid assessment to determine that there's not enough or 8% of the workforce to do the apprentice work. And that's really nothing that we track. It's something the trade association and contractors, subcontractors track. So they're shifting the burden onto the local public. The second one is we can waive the requirement if there's a disproportionately high ratio of material cost to labor hours. And again, this is a pre-bid cost analysis, and we don't get those numbers until we actually bid it. So what's happening now is our efforts going to be focused on the governor, the Virginia Trade Association for dealing with the case law. They drafted a letter using our talking points to send to the governor on the 24th. That's going to request that this be referred to there's a public body procurement work group, and we're asking that it be sent to that work group and the findings from that work group from the General Assembly before they pass this law, so we understand the impacts of it. The other bill was the FOIA bill, and that one has failed.
What's the FOIA bill?
FOIA bill was going to increase penalties for failing public procedures.
Right, page 4, Kathy Flippo, we'll see Ms. Martindale, who attended this year's comment in the waters. We accepted two awards, one for learning, one for our workforce development program. The other was for the remember back at the baseball event where we gave out that little pamphlet at the end. Lisa. Moving on to the community, I'm gonna ask Mr. Robertson to walk through the arrearages and also the link dashboard. If you can get for that, I just want to call your attention to we did update one page of the link dashboard. The graph is getting ridiculous. What is going on? So what we've done is we've taken that data and put it in table on a rolling average on the left. It shows you arrearage versus the perfect receipt. And then what we've done on the right with the graph is that's just the new disbursements that was done within the last 3 months as well. So we kind of like the data table, which obviously, this is taking a shot in the dark for the board, but we thought it was a nice way to present the data, but take a look at it, give us feedback. After and make a lot of things about. You stand up at this.
So just a few things to point out under delinquencies. You can see the number of accounts that are delinquent as well as the total dollar amount dropped a little bit this month. It's kind of to be expected because we have had limited disconnections for several months now. We only had 3 in January. That's because of the weather. So anytime it's under 32 degrees, we can't. So that's kind of limited our ability to disconnect there. And then we also have 430 accounts on payment plans still, which is great in terms of, giving our customers options to stay in good standing. But those payment plans also kind of slow down the difficulty. Also, just above the chart, you can see where we have been tracking the number of people that signed up for leave or payment plan disconnections. We did not have anybody that was disconnected in large part. We didn't disconnect that many people sign up for leave. However, you'll see the total number at the bottom there is 11,968 increased. That's because we retroactively gave folks an extra disbursement that were under So looking at the LEAP dashboard now, again, if you all remember, we retroactively gave everybody that had previously qualified for LEAP an extra bump in money. So you can see that we gave away $21,000 this period, about 16,000 of that for the retroactive disbursements. We're still sitting at $143,000 in our account, which is great. We've helped 48 customers and we've only disconnected 160 folks. That's since July 1st, so not a ton. If you flip to page 2, you can say we are starting to see some trends in specific areas here, which is helpful for communications. We can now kind of target those with specific communications. We're still reaching out to all of these customers by phone, mail, oftentimes text message for payment plans. So we're getting to them a number of ways. And then Ms. Waters pointed this out earlier, but we've partnered with the Soccer Association, which is another great way for us to communicate with different people that we wouldn't normally communicate with. And we're also working with the city on ways that we can kind of reach, I'll say, specific areas that could use a boost in either LEAP or payment plan. And then on to the third page. This is the disbursements over the last 3 months. Some of these were those folks that we gave a secondary disbursement to. You can see that now that we've adjusted to where we're giving $1,000 per customer, it, for the most part, covers almost everybody's bill with a few exceptions. Those larger account balances obviously are not covered. Over the last month, it was only 5 customers.
Mr. Robertson, are you seeing certain patterns now in ratepayer behavior?
I'm looking at the map and you see proximity of the disconnections and leaks.
Definitely in certain areas. And I think there's always an element when you're doing either disconnections or payment plans or disbursement or anything where there's word of mouth too. So I think that plays a part in some of those groupings as well. You're definitely seeing trends in certain areas. You can kind of track behavior of individual customers. It's kind of hard. Like, I mean, you start recognizing certain accounts and you can kind of, especially when I'm manually entering any of the data to the LEAP dashboard, you can start to see who's paid their bill off entirely, which is always great. Who's on payment plan, things like that. We're starting to see some trends. There are a lot of folks that, not as many as you think, that are signing up for a payment plan and LEAP. Oftentimes people are getting LEAP and then covering the remainder of their balance, which is great, especially now that we've increased it to $1,000.
I think it's important to note we've also developed a relationship with cities having departments who are trying to avenues, not just avenues. To reach out to try and make it.
I mean, what's interesting in the map is that there's some areas where there seems to be a very high correlation between LEAP participation and disconnections. So in the West End and in North Old Town, but up in the Arlandria area, you're seeing a lot of disconnections without LEAP yet. So I'm wondering.
We've
Is that
actually,
like a language barrier issue?
we've placed ads here, like targeted to that area. And we do put them in English and Spanish.
Okay. Like 201, 204 in the upper right corner. A lot of disconnections and I don't think a single LEAP disbursement.
Interesting.
Yeah. But that's great, that's great that you're targeting outreach to those areas. It's really
Yeah,
good
I
use of
think this
data.
map has been super helpful for us too, because you can really see, this is an area of interest here.
Yeah.
This census tract has a lot as well.
In North Old Town, is that, it's about where the housing authority units are. Are they individually metered and a lot of them has one?
Usually depends on the
Yeah, because it's old buildings, new buildings. And
Um, that's one of the groups that we've been working, we're trying to work with Helen from the city to make sure that we can get the- So that's a large part of that effort is how can we.
the housing authority communicates directly with their tenants.
Yep, and we're trying to leverage that as much as possible. I hope that's helpful. Yeah, we do have pretty good contact information from a lot of folks, I think. The number of even payment plans that we've seen, especially payment plans, that's just getting out. It's just interesting. If it's echoed by, our line.
I have to say, the LEAP program, the way it's created, and especially the way you all are presenting it, is giving the board more visibility into challenges our ratepayers are facing with our bills than we've ever had before. It's really, as this map fills out, we're learning a lot of things we did not know.
It'll be interesting to see how it shapes in a couple of years too, when we get over this COVID. That's new
Kind of.
balance.
Or get through the whole COVID experience. Yeah, I know. This is really.
The fraction of wedge on the graph needs to be up.
Okay.
Because I was just looking at it, I was like, it's still a tiny sliver, but it's like, actually, we're getting money out.
That's the right second.
I forgot.
It's good. I think this is maybe the first month that the number, well, we haven't gotten data every month on how much is remaining, but for all the months we've had it, it's the first month that the number went down, which I think is good because we're actually getting money out. We still have lots left.
Mr. Carr, before we move off the monthly report, I do have a question on page 4. Perhaps you've answered it and I've forgotten. Hold on. I'm sorry, page 2. The sampling we're doing for PFAS and PFOS, how often are we doing that sampling? Just once per quarter. And the reason is that's expensive and time consuming and the accuracy is probably still questionable.
Yeah, I think, we've had to train up our staff to be able to. Even quarterly is frequent enough. You haven't seen the draft.
Yeah.
If we were, we would
Yeah.
change the frequency. But we've committed to quarterly sampling.
So we don't believe there are any sort of daily spikes or weekly spikes in PFAS concentration simply because of the way it enters the system, I'm sure. Yeah.
We'll be doing some additional sampling. Significant industrial uses this year. So we'll see if that is driving any of our concentration. But if you look at our service area, a lot of these could be coming.
Given the amount of treatment we do for Fairfax, what does Fairfax do in regards to kind of looking at pre-treatment and seeing where PFASs are coming from in Fairfax?
We're same boat, pretty much. We're requiring our significant industrial users to start monitoring for PFAS. As we renew our permits to them, that's a new requirement. Right now, everybody's just in the data collection because we really don't have a good grasp of where it's coming from. We have ideas of where it might come And most of our customers also are residential. We have a few industrial. Max Hospital, for example, that they discharge. So there are a few, but not that many.
Right.
And we report back to.
I don't think we have an outside unit.
I think the Max Hospital. Actually, and we have Washington Post. Not that many. But we have an agreement, pre-treatment agreement with Pax Renew. And they send them annual reports, quarterly reports of all the activities that we take against the industrial users.
Where this is going in this state right now, what we're seeing, actually kind of, there's tiered approach in now, in recognition. There's class option truck, and now in Virginia, that's gonna be the flavor of the story. Kind of big interest of it. So we're seeing a neighborly issue now where you can't dispose of solids in one state, and one other state. We got to have a good year.
Blue Plains delivers a lot of solids to Virginia.
Yeah, and what I'm hearing is Maryland, they are working now on legislation both in the General Assembly and in the Senate.
They're adopting the EPA draft risk assessment standard and setting a limit on
1 billion.
billion.
Yes, 1 part per billion. You have, in your blood, probably you have 3 parts per billion. Basically, they just say you cannot use it.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, moving along to the next dashboard.
So, yeah. Page 4, nothing really important on the first page. I think looking over here, simple pictures. I guess maybe calling attention to one item here is we have an accident in February 19th where he brought beyond he is being representing the industry experience for the nuclear projects for the. He will be coming back to the board next month to present an overview of public handling when the
If I may,
Sure.
we're talking about the wondering, planning for that request as part of that design or technical?
The CPT is solely looking at concrete for MGD. The 58 MGD cities for MGD additional capacity. So moving forward with the option of patients. To meet it.
Does it impact the other processes to
That's your children.
Are we
River
spending,
New dashboard.
question, Mr. Carl, are we spending money on the 4MGD analysis for the city? Are we having outside consultants?
Yes.
Is the city reimbursing us?
We have a draft. Funding MOU.
So that's kind of the staff understanding that there will be, that's the way it's going to work.
We're
Good.
making sure that Fairfax is capital costs. Riverview, page 3. Cool pictures, really boring. Right? And then the real work is here happening at the plant. It's 4x4, and we are starting to see the first story of our construction. My background, which is really neat, you see almost 420 to the building now. Looking ahead, spent to date, 479. So we have 121 million now. So we got, right?
Community outreach, you all know we released the book. So we're just on content for you corner. And you can see a really good picture of the superstructure in the bottom right, page 5. And then on the back, Robertson thinks this is a cool photo. I wish we'd seen that concrete, we finished the excavation at Royal Street, we're down to, like I said, down to the terrace level, we're in a base slab. And then really exciting times at Royal Street. We're pushed to get this done by the summer and your stores. Good night. We do have to go back to one agenda item is one of the around the time for giving PM and DZ policy. Please help me page to the board.
Two is there are a few other minor revisions, but the one major revision is not in the other version is on page 2, and then there's the next section. So the state procedures that Mr. Call referenced require that we can only disqualify. So we worked this in the policy with a pass fail. The RFQ, so it lists 6 items where they either pass or fail. The financial ability, breach of contract, prior contract, criminal convictions related to construction, debarment, and failure to provide required information. If we deem that they fail any of these, we're required to give written notification within 30 days. So that appears on page 2, and then again on page 6.
I think that's important to know for the process that if the contractor does not meet the minimum requirement, that allows us to say, we're not reviewing ours, I'll rewrite the letter and say why we were disqualified from the way the code is set up.
You have opportunity to cure? No opportunity to cure?
We would give it, we would call and ask them questions. If they can't fix it, cure it, then I can do the environment or another job. Yeah.
Or number 6, that they forgot to put a form in.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think
they're allowed to cure that, yeah.
In the event of cure, yeah. But these were missing from the policy before. They do bring in that requirement that we do. We've never done that, but it does meet the code and the secretary's recommendations and procedures. Sorry for the long.
It happens. So motion?
I've got a question and a comment. We've got governance and audit committee meetings and pre-meetings in March and April. Should all the board members come to both the pre-meetings and the meetings, or just, no? Fine.
Pre-meeting should just be we publicize them. I think Mr. James made a good point of that. If the members of the pre-meeting, the next meeting, we would ask both members to come to the prep for the meeting. I think for finance and Dr. Wong's first meeting, we publicize them to come up here. For the actual meeting, it's up to it.
Sure. Okay. I've distributed the Chloe books to a 3-year-old in the neighborhood. And I heard from his parents yesterday. Now imagine you're a 35-year-old lobbyist for a pharmaceutical company. And his son asks him to read that every night. And he's learning all there is to know about it.
Future employee right there. Okay, is there a motion to approve the revised CMAR policy?
I moved.
Second. Second by Mr. Jenks, moved by Ms. Hammer. All in favor?
Hi.
Aye. Is that all? Mr. Carl.
Yeah, we'll come back in March. It's good for the board to hear it.
No, it, been a long week. Ready, yeah. Motion to adjourn. All in favor? CA just hired George.
To what?
I told her.